There is something fascinating about a story that does not need to be told. A mystery left unsolved. A past left unexplored. It adds weight to a character. It makes them feel larger than life. Han Solo was one of those characters. He was not just a smuggler. He was a legend, a rogue with a heart of gold. A man who had seen it all and lived to tell the tale. But the moment you start peeling back the layers, explaining every little detail of how he became who he was, something is lost. And that is exactly what happened with Solo. This is not just about a bad movie. It is about a failure to understand what makes storytelling powerful. The best stories do not hand you everything on a silver platter. They let you wonder. They let you imagine. But Solo takes a character defined by his mystery and turns him into a checklist of events. How did he get his name? Here is the answer. How did he meet Chewbacca? Here is the answer. How did he win the Millennium Falcon? Here is the answer. But at some point you have to ask yourself, were these questions ever meant to be answered in the first place? Movies should give us something more than just information. They should give us emotion, tension, and the feeling that anything can happen. But Solo is a movie trapped in a cage of its own making. It is so focused on filling in gaps that it forgets to tell a compelling story. It plays everything safe. It never takes a risk. It never challenges the audience. And because of that, it never becomes anything more than just another forgettable entry in the Star Wars universe. And that is the real tragedy here. A movie about Han Solo should have been thrilling. It should have been unpredictable. It should have been a wild ride through the underworld of the galaxy, filled with danger, betrayal, and that signature charm we all loved. But instead, what we got was a film that never quite figured out what it wanted to be. It tries to be a prequel. It tries to be a heist movie. It tries to be an origin story. But in the end, it is none of those things. It is just a movie that exists. Nothing more, nothing less. In this video, we're going to break down exactly why Solo is not a good movie. We will look at the way it fails its characters, the way it fails its story, and the way it fails the very essence of Star Wars itself. We will explore the moments that should have worked but did not, the choices that should have made the movie stronger but only made it weaker, and by the end, you will see exactly why some stories are better left untold. I wanted to like this movie. I really did. A story about Han Solo sounds like the perfect way to explore more of the galaxy. But instead, we got something that feels lifeless and hollow. This is not the Han Solo I remember. This is a version of him that does not capture what made him special. A good prequel should tell a story that enhances what we already know, but Solo does the opposite. Instead of making Han Solo more interesting, it makes him feel ordinary. Everything about him is spelled out with no mystery, no intrigue, no sense that he is a man shaped by his own choices. Instead, he is just following a checklist of events leading up to the original trilogy. Then there is the pacing. It is rushed and yet somehow slow at the same time. Scenes fly by so quickly that nothing is given time to breathe. Important moments that should feel emotional are glossed over with little weight. It is like the movie is just going through the motions, desperately trying to hit every reference without ever stopping to ask if those references actually matter. And the worst part is that this could have been great. The idea of seeing the underworld of Star Wars, the scum and villainy that thrive in the shadows, is something fans have wanted for years. But instead of giving us something fresh and unpredictable, the movie plays it safe. It is predictable. It is uninspired. It is just not a good movie. Han Solo is a character who was built on charm. He was rough around the edges, but likable. Someone who had a hard exterior, but a good heart underneath. But in this movie, none of that really comes through. This version of Han is bland. He does not have the same wit, the same presence, the same energy that made the character iconic. Alden Ehrenreich is not bad, but he is not Harrison Ford. That is not his fault, but it is impossible to separate the two. Ford played Han with a natural swagger that made every scene feel effortless. Here, it feels forced. It feels like an imitation rather than a new take on the character. It never quite clicks, and because of that, the entire movie suffers. Then there is Lando. Donald Glover does a better job capturing the essence of the character, but even then, it feels like something is missing. Lando was smooth, charismatic, and unpredictable. Here, he is just another piece of the nostalgia puzzle. His presence does not add much to the story. He is just here because the movie needs him to be. And that is the problem with all of this. These characters are not really being explored in new ways. They are just being placed in front of us with a wink and a nod. Remember this character, remember this ship, remember this line. It is all just there, and none of it feels earned. The biggest issue with Solo is that it is afraid to be its own thing. Every major moment in Han's life is explained in ways that feel unnecessary. Do we really need to know how he got his name? Do we really need to see how he met Chewbacca? Do we really need to watch him win the Falcon from Lando? It is all so obvious. and it takes away from the mystery that made the character interesting. There is something powerful about not knowing everything. Han Solo was a character who arrived fully formed in A New Hope. He had a past, sure, but it did not need to be spelled out. We got glimpses of it through his actions, through his attitude, through the way he talked about things like the Kessel Run. That was enough. That made him feel real. But now we know too much. And instead of making him more compelling, it makes him less. Now he is just a guy who stumbled into a series of events that shaped his life. There is no sense that he earned his reputation. There is no moment where he truly feels like the scoundrel we all loved. It is just a series of checkboxes being marked off, one by one. And because of that, nothing feels organic. Nothing feels like it happened naturally. It is all just filling in the blanks, in ways that no one really asked for. Instead of expanding the character, it shrinks him. Instead of making him feel larger than life, it makes him feel small. And that is a shame. The action in Solo is fine. That is all it is. Fine. There is nothing particularly memorable about it. Nothing that stands out as truly special. Star Wars has always had a way of making action feel grand and exciting, but here, it just feels like a checklist of things we have seen before. There is no real energy to it. The train heist should have been one of the best sequences in the movie, but it is surprisingly dull. There is no weight to it, no real sense of danger. It is just another set piece that exists because the movie needed an action scene at that moment. It is visually impressive, but there is no emotion behind it. It happens, and then it is over. And that is the case with most of the movie. There are shootouts, there are chases, there are moments that should be thrilling, but somehow are not. Maybe it is because we know Han Solo cannot die. Maybe it is because the stakes never feel real. Whatever the reason, the action never quite delivers the way it should. And in a movie about Han Solo, that is a big problem. This should have been a wild ride from start to finish. It should have been unpredictable. It should have been exhilarating. Instead, it is just another Star Wars movie going through the motions. Another wasted opportunity. Solo does not even feel like a Star Wars movie. Not really. The heart of Star Wars has always been its sense of adventure. Its feeling of wonder. Its ability to transport you to another world. But here, everything feels small. Everything feels contained. It is just another story in the galaxy, but it does not feel like it belongs. Part of that is the visuals. The movie is dark. Not in tone, but literally. Scenes are washed in a muddy brown color that makes everything look dull. There is no vibrancy, no sense of a living, breathing world. It all feels like a set, like a soundstage. It does not feel like Star Wars. And then there is the story itself. It does not have that same sense of myth and legend that Star Wars is known for. Instead, it feels like a small-scale adventure that happens to take place in the same universe. That is not necessarily a bad thing, but it is not what Star Wars is about. It lacks that magic. It lacks that feeling of something greater. And when you take all of that away, what is left a movie that does not feel like it knows what it wants to be? A movie that does not take risks. A movie that plays it safe and, in doing so, loses everything that made Star Wars special in the first place. Solo was not a movie that needed to exist. That is the sad truth. There was no demand for it, no real reason for it to be made, and in the end, it did not add anything to the Star Wars universe. It just told a story that was already better left untold. It is not the worst Star Wars movie, but it might be the most pointless. It does not ruin the character, but it does not enhance him either. It is just there. And for a character as iconic as Han Solo, that is the biggest disappointment of all. Maybe one day Star Wars will learn the right lessons from its failures. Maybe it will stop trying to explain everything, stop trying to answer questions that never needed answers. Maybe it will go back to telling stories that feel essential, rather than just filling in the gaps. But until then, we will always have movies like Solo. Movies that try to recapture the magic, but never quite succeed. Movies that feel unnecessary.